Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning. I've got some weird screen share, so I can't actually see who's in there. Oh, Holly's gone on full screen. Right, let me change that for you.
Yeah, you don't want that on full screen.
There we are. There's everybody. Morning, everyone. Just let the numbers file in quickly before we start. But just to let you all know, we're recording the session. These go on our YouTube channel for everyone to watch on demand afterwards. So just to let you know, obviously go on mute if you can, unless you're speaking. Thanks, Bina. Right, we might kick off because we've got lots and lots to get through today. But after a sort of summer break, it feels like, we're delighted to have the next in our season of how-to sessions, those insight moments where we bring the all-in actions to life. You may remember we announced the next 3, so we now have 9 in the all-in action plan back in June. And this is action 7, and it's all around how we can support our mental health in the industry. And I'm delighted we've got an incredible panel of speakers today. We've got Sue Todd, who's the CEO of NABS. We've got Zaid Al-Kassab, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for Channel 4. And we've got Sean Betts, who is Chief Product and Technology Officer for Omnicom Media Group. I'm delighted Sean stepped in sort of relatively last minute. We were going to have Avalon Thompson from MediaCom, and she's unable to join us today. But we do send her our very best wishes. So I wanted to kick off, as normal, as we do in traditional all-in style, with Dan, who's director from Kratos, to give us a run through the raw data around mental health, what we discovered when we did the first all-in census in March 2021. So I'm going to hand over to you without further ado, Dan, and then we'll have a chat with our panel.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. Morning, everyone. I'm just going to share a few slides with you to run through, as Sharon said, the key findings in relation to mental health from the 2021 all-in census. Can everyone see that screen? Yeah, all good. Okay, so just a quick recap. So the survey itself received 16,000 more than 16,000 responses, which, as far as we're aware, is the largest industry-specific D&I survey and response rate in the UK. And it really was testament to everyone's engagement and everyone really getting on board and supporting All In. We did a few estimations that's somewhere in the region of around £500,000 of industry time that was given and dedicated to the all-in census and this diversity and inclusion topic by the industry. So again, just really reflects how seriously everyone took it and how valuable that data is. I mean, that's a massive response rate and a really valuable sample size. So first of all, I'm just going to talk you through some of the representation and demographic findings in relation to mental health. And there were essentially 2 questions that directly related to people's mental health in All In. There was one which was basically, are you affected by a mental health condition, e.g. depression or bipolar and things like that? And the second one was, are you affected by stress and anxiety? No, there was no time frame on that, but the language was active and present. So it was aimed at people that were very recently or currently struggling with those conditions. As you can see there on the chart on the left, the dark blue chart, of all of the people that responded, 12% said that yes, they were affected by a mental health condition. Slightly higher proportion of women, 13% versus men, but that's not a massive difference at all, to be honest. Barely significant, but worth noting. In terms of stress and anxiety, the chart on the right, so 30% were of all respondents said that they were affected by stress or anxiety. And the difference between men and women was significant in this instance, with nearly a third of women, slightly over a third of women saying that they were affected by stress and anxiety. Now, I think a really interesting thing to note about this is that this was conducted in March 2021, so it was kind of mid-pandemic. I think we'd just come out of a lockdown. Obviously, a lot of people working at home, a lot of working conditions in flux. So it would be really interesting to see what happens to both of these indicators when we repeat the census in next March in 2023. But particularly that stress and anxiety one, it'd be interesting to see the impact the pandemic actually had on that specifically. In terms of differences in other demographics, younger people were much more likely to report mental health conditions and stress and anxiety than older people in the workforce. You can see on both of these charts, mental health conditions on the left and stress and anxiety on the right. 18 to 34-year-olds were by far, more likely to be reporting suffering from these conditions, and that really the proportions decreased significantly, age group by age group, through to the older age groups. I mean, we talked a lot about this within the AA and steering group, and we don't know exactly what the reasons are for this. Obviously, people at the younger age, they're new to the industry, they're possibly new to the workplace. That all needs to be considered. Are those roles more stressful in a lot of ways than more senior roles? People getting squeezed, people getting harsher deadlines. I mean, that's one way to potentially view it. Another one is that perhaps the industry is becoming more open to people with mental health conditions, so that there's more opportunity for people to feel like, yes, I can work in advertising. Or conversely, people with mental health conditions may be more likely to drop out as they get older. So, I mean, that's another consideration. We don't really know what is driving that. It's something we'll try and unpick more in 2023, but it's certainly a very interesting finding. In terms of other demographics, LGB plus people were also significantly more likely to report mental health conditions, 26% of LGB plus people compared to 12% across the all-in sample, and stress and anxiety was 43% for that group compared to 30% across the wider sample. So LGB plus age, and to a certain extent gender, there were differences in mental health conditions and stress and anxiety. Across any other demographic, there wasn't really any differences. So ethnicity, geography, there wasn't any kind of notable differences on those. Really interesting one is that of all the people with a disability, so people that are defined as disabled by the Equality Act in 2010, 84% reported a mental health related condition. And so what this pie chart is saying, that of all the people that are disabled, which was a 9% of the advertising and marketing workforce, 55% of them, that disability or that condition that was defined as disabled was a mental health condition, and 29% there was physical and mental health conditions, and 17% it was a physical disability that they were referring to. So obviously a subset there of the people with disabilities, really mental health conditions are really significant for that group. So now we're going to look a little bit about the experience and what people who reported having mental health conditions or stress and anxiety, what they were actually experiencing. And I don't think any of us will be surprised to hear that on the whole, people who had mental health conditions and reported them had a much more negative experience in the workplace than those that didn't. We're going to look a little bit at company support here. So of those people with a mental health condition, 42% said that their company is aware of that condition, and that fell to 31% for those with stress and anxiety. So the majority of people reporting either of these conditions, their company was totally unaware of it. Those that had made their company aware, 39% felt that their company could do more to support them, which is pretty much the same for stress and anxiety with 40%. And for those with a mental health condition, 21% that they were likely to leave their company. We don't know if that was directly because of having a mental health condition, that the question was likely to leave because of a lack of diversity or inclusion, but it is significantly higher than the all-in average, which was 12%, so more than double the all-in average, then they're likely to leave their company. In terms of culture, so people with a mental health condition and reporting stress and anxiety were less likely to feel, more likely to feel that they do not belong at their company. So you've got 18% for mental health that feel they do not belong, 15% with stress and anxiety compared to 10%, which is the all-in average for everyone that responded. They were also less likely to feel supported at work. So 66% of people felt supported at work across the sample, and that fell to 54 and 57% for mental health and stress and anxiety. And they were also much more likely to feel consistently anxious in their job. I can see there, half of the people reporting mental health conditions felt that way. Again, much higher than the all-in average. In terms of demeaning behaviour, again, potentially some more worrying kind of experiences here. People with mental health conditions were much more likely to report being bullied or undermined in the last 12 months, almost double that of the all-in average, 21% versus 12%. Again, much more likely to feel undervalued compared to colleagues of equal competence. And again, much more likely to feel unfairly spoken over or not listened to. And again, the stats are there, and for both mental health and stress and anxiety, much higher than the all-in averages there. So that is a very quick run through of the data. There is much more, and if anyone wants to dig into those a little bit more or have any questions, then put a question on the group or get in touch afterwards, and I'll be happy to talk you through them.
Thanks so much, Dan. Some really sobering stats in there. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, it just feels like there's never been a better time for this session, actually. It feels increasingly more important for us all in the industry. So if I can come to you first, I'll just let Dan stop screen share there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, Sue, if I can come to you first, for those who aren't maybe that familiar with NABS on the call, it'd be great to hear a bit more about your work. But I know that coming into the role of CEO this year, it's been significantly impacted by the pandemic, with a drop, like, is it 1.8 million in revenue, which is largely donations from industry, and yet a sort of 23% surge in demand for your services. So it'd be great to know a bit more about what NABS does, but what kind of things are people coming to you about? What are the key issues in the last year or so?
Yeah, hello everyone, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me. It's as I think Sharon says, it's a great time to have this session. I think, one, because we're about to get all in again to see what the movement is, but I think I was just looking at the Collins word of the year yesterday. I heard it on Radio 4 on the Today programme, permacrisis, which apparently is a kind of the continuous and unrelentless layering of uncertainty and instability, which is the word of the year. So I think we can all relate to that, and I think it's useful to think about in the context of this conversation about sort of mental health and mental wellness. So yeah, I'm the newish CEO of NABS, and for those of you who don't know NABS, it's the charity at the heart of our advertising, media and marketing community. We are dedicated to advancing the mental wellness of everyone in the industry. The charity is over 100 years old, but has continued to evolve its services, in consultation with the industry and to reflect, the challenges and needs of the people in it. We try and support that vision about advancing mental wellness by driving systemic change and having conversations about how we all drive the sort of cultural change that we all want in terms of supporting people's mental wellness, hence the work from the AA and lots of other people on this call, but also personal support. And I guess the most prevalent services that we offer that probably relate to this topic. We're not a mental health specialist, but we do see that nearly all our calls that come into the advice line, which is our sort of frontline service, have some element of emotional well-being or support in them, even if it's not the number one reason someone's calling. But our number one call is for people to get help with sort of mental wellness and emotional support. Number two is finances in this current climate this year, and number three is redundancies. But even if it's not explicit, and the obvious reason that people first put the call into NABS or go onto our support bot, which is the other way that we can engage for people who don't want to make the call, essentially nearly all the calls have an element of emotional well-being at their centre, and the people that they're speaking to on the phone lines are mostly ex-industry who've retrained as counsellors, psychotherapists, a business psychologist and various other specialisms to navigate those individual conversations and offer people the right support. So sort of behind the advice line, I guess, is a range of other services, from free masterclasses, which run, hundreds run a year on everything on topics from managing stress and resilience to building confidence and gravitas, to a newly launched one for managers around inclusivity and inclusive leadership, because we can see, and I think the data that Dan just showed as well shows that, there is an intersection between often how people feel about their sense of belonging in work and whether they're included and welcomed, and their mental well-being and mental health. So that program's development specifically has been to craft sort of micro ways that leaders and managers can affect that we believe from the data does have a direct impact on people's mental well-being and mental health. So other services that we have is we do offer financial grants, which in this climate, I think it doesn't take a genius to work out that these things are related sometimes, and that often if you're in the middle of feeling extremely anxious about your finances or any other aspect of what's going on at home as well as at work, that you bring the same mind to work that you have at home. So we offer that service as well at the moment, because that's in response to direct needs. But I suppose the other very fundamental service we have to offer people when we have the conversation about whether they need any more dedicated or specialist support for their mental health, if it's something more of a condition, as I think your terminology is in the All-In survey, or whether it's what I would call broader mental wellness to encompass anxiety and some of the other data that's clearly the issues that are clearly showing up in the data, is that we offer therapeutic services. So we can offer 7 to 12 free sessions with the right type of therapy provider for individuals who have had the call or contacted us, and we've kind of talked with them about them needing some further support. So that's a large part of what we do in this space. But we also do help and want to help, and we get calls from HR teams and HR practitioners, because we do work with organisations to try and make sure we're seen as a sort of fourth emergency service within what companies can do themselves, because NABS is in addition to what clearly organisations like Channel 4 and OMG Group can do and do brilliant work on, because we do find that sometimes people want to come to someone outside of their own organisation. So we're that additional layer of support there as well, to talk to people, assess their needs, and then hopefully find them the right ongoing service and give them advice about how to manage that issue or potentially talk about their issue back in their workplace. But yeah, impartial, independent, all informed by the latest sort of neuroscience, behavioural science and the data that we collect. But that's what NABS is here to do. But fundamentally at the moment, the number one reason people contact us is for emotional support and for emotional wellbeing.
That's brilliant, Sue. And it'd be great to know, because obviously that the action within the action plan is for companies that are adopting the plan to donate to NABS, and also to signpost your services to the wider, their employees. It would be great to know, is that easy for businesses to do? Obviously, presuming they just go into your website. It'd be great to know
very easy.
Like that.
Obviously, very easy.
Yeah, just give
me and I'll take your cash immediately. No, extremely easy. I mean, we do obviously get supported by mainly corporate donations, as Sharon said, business donations from many people and the organisations on this call, including my fellow panellists and speakers. But you can also give on an individual level, and you can go to our website and there is a Just Giving page. We do get small amounts from people individually, but we're really happy at any time to come in and talk to your organisation or your team about the wide range of NABS services. We do a lot of outreach work to come and make sure we know how many new people there are in the industry over the last 24 months, and it has been harder for us to engage with the sector and individual organisations, you know, during pandemic. So we are on a full mission to re-engage, speak to as many people as possible, and come into individual businesses or teams and talk about the range of services we offer and how people can support us. As Sharon says, we do, you know, most of our funding is corporate donations, but we also run fundraising events through the year. There's a event in the summer, straight to the summer, we have golf events, we have music quizzes, which a number of your organisations will take tables at and support us that way too. But yes, the website is the first port of call if you want to individually give, or you would like to get in contact with me or anyone in my team, and we would be delighted at any time to come and talk with you or your boss or your finance director, which is usually, or HR director, which is normally the sorts of people we come talk to. So yeah,
amazing.
anytime.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Sue. Zaid, now that you've made it back into the Channel 4 building following a fire alarm, great to see you. It would be really brilliant to hear about your own experience. I know you've spoken out, you've written about this extensively, about your own experience with anxiety and depression and the impact. I'm really keen to hear what the impact speaking out has had in the responses that you've got and what you've seen.
Yeah, I know that in a minute, Sean's going to talk to you about lots of different things that fit with the action plan. So I thought it might be better just to talk about, you know, my own experience. As many on the call might know, because I've published a couple of blogs with Campaign, I'm someone who's suffered from both depression and anxiety. For me, they're two very different things, although I respect that for many people they're on a sort of a spectrum or a continuum of different mental health concerns. And for many years, for at least a decade, but I only started talking about it and sharing it with colleagues or with the industry in the last year. The reason I did that is actually quite a practical one and quite sort of connected with the conversation here today. I mean, the first reason I did it was I thought it might help me, and after a long period of covering up on things that I was going through, I thought it might be easier in the workplace if I was a bit more open about it and people didn't think my behaviour was odd rather than explain what was going on. I kind of liken that to, you know, 20 or 30 years ago, you know, talking about cancer was a taboo subject, and people used all sorts of euphemisms for it and certainly wouldn't have talked about it at work, perhaps to their closest friend, but not otherwise. And nowadays, sadly, we often hear in the workplace that so-and-so has had a cancer diagnosis, and you know what they're going through. You can understand why they're absent from work sometimes. You are more helpful to them when they come back. It should be helpful all the time, but you know exactly what I mean. You go the extra mile with them because you know they've been off and they've had a difficult time, and everyone's very supportive. It doesn't feel like an odd thing to do. It feels like a typical supporting collegiate sort of work sort of thing to do. And yet, you've seen the numbers, depends on which study you use, but anything from 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 3 people in the workplace having different mental health conditions worrying them. And it's still not something that's talked about. Certainly the odd occasion you hear about it, but you don't hear it from 1 in 3 of your colleagues. So I felt it was a good thing to do for me, and it might have some knock-on effect. But there was a very practical business reason as well, which was I was sponsoring the Channel 4 inclusion efforts, and we were about to launch something called Inclusion Passports. Inclusion passports built on the idea of disability passports, which some companies use. Now, of course, disability adjustments and accessibility is something that's laid down in law. All companies have to do it. There isn't a law saying companies have to make appropriate adjustments for mental health, although if it is a medical condition, there are situations in which that is an obligation. But normally, if you're someone who is suffering from anxiety, for example, there's no reason a company has to do anything for you. And that makes it quite hard to talk about because you don't really know what you're asking for. So we decided at Channel 4 to implement inclusion passports, which went well beyond disability. They weren't just about mental health. They could be about anything. It could be about caring responsibilities, childcare, different difficult situations at home, anything that you wanted, that you had a formal opportunity to talk to your line manager about and say, look, this is my situation. I'm a single parent. This is why I need to leave at a certain time on certain days, or this is my situation. You know, in my case, one of the reasons that I pop off work early in the middle of the week is to go and play tennis. Tennis is part of my regime for managing my depression. It's probably the most effective thing I've found. To be able to do that midweek is a really good help to me. And yeah, it's a bit weird for a senior executive to pop off early on an afternoon to go and play tennis. That feels a bit odd. I was really uncomfortable. I used to make all sorts of excuses and pretend I was doing other things because I didn't want to say I was doing it to manage my depression. So for me personally, that was helpful. But the inclusion passports, which we were rolling out in the company, made me think long and hard about the fact that I was not disclosing and not doing exactly what I was asking people in the company to be more open about. That felt really odd for me. And I don't think that cognitive dissonance was going to sit very well with me. So it kind of forced me into being more open. My experience has been that it's a wonderful thing that it kind of forced me, that I took that leap, because firstly, I've had no negative feedback or reactions from people at all. And in fact, now having spoken more to people in my situation in the workplace, I don't know anyone who has. So it's an unfounded fear to be open about these things. And the second thing that that happened is an awful lot of people came to me privately via email, people I didn't even know on LinkedIn, but even close friends as a result of me being open about this, and disclosed the mental health challenges that they've had. People in the industry, senior people in the industry, names you would all know, who are not open about it, but have been to me, and obviously I'll keep their confidence. But it just made me feel, wow, what a widespread challenge this is. The All-In data certainly supports that, and the action plan's a really good way of going about trying to make people feel more included and more comfortable in their skin. And my personal story, I think, reinforces that. So if you're on this call, and it's really lovely to see so many people from so many organizations here, but if you're on this call and you're thinking, how do we tackle this? Is this really going to work? Does it really help people? Is it worth the effort? My experience is it really is. I think it's helped a great number of people, and Sean's going to talk you through some wonderful things they do at OMD, who we work with at Channel 4, and I think it's a great action plan for what you should do.
Thanks so much, Zaid. And I can echo that. We've done a podcast where I sort of opened up about my own experience. It is incredible the response you get from people you don't know, from people you do know. I mean, that just a very quick question before I go to Sean around that, because I know I read something that you'd written about. There were no real negatives, as you say. Everyone was really supportive, but sometimes people just don't know what to say, and it feels to me like that's maybe the sort of missing link for people, to encourage people to speak out.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It's like how can we help people know what to say in that situation?
It's both hard to speak out and hard to know how to react. And when I first talked about it, I hadn't appreciated the latter. That someone sitting opposite you, you say, oh, you know, don't worry about me leaving early. It's because I've got depression and I go off to play tennis. And then they kind of look at you open mouthed. They clearly want to help, and they've got really no idea what. So I have learned over time what I say in those situations. You know, I mean, I tend to start by saying, don't worry, I'm not expecting anything from you. It's just good that you know about it. Like if you knew if I, you know, had broken my leg, or if my kids were sick, that's all I'm doing. So that you can think as a human being about how to deal with that. Sometimes there are more specific things, you know, I won't go into details, but there are times when I need a bit of help, and I am able to ask for that. And it's good just to put people at their ease by saying, listen, I'm just telling you like I'd tell you if, you know, if I'd been diagnosed with something, or if one of my children was sick and I needed some time to take care of them, or a parent or whatever. So yeah, you don't have to get too deep. I think people are often worried that you have to somehow reveal your innermost, darkest secrets and your soul, but you really don't. You don't have to. People are generally pretty kind-hearted and appreciative that you told them. Yeah,
exactly. And that expectation maybe that person you're telling needs to fix it somehow, and it's just some really good old-fashioned listening, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really important to say, listen, you're not my doctor or my therapist. I'm just telling you so you know about my behaviour and about me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Zaid. Sean, thanks so much for stepping in on this panel, and be really great to hear a bit more from the sort of corporate point of view about the brilliant work that OMG is doing. Obviously, you're an all-in champion like Channel 4, really supportive of this work, but it'd be great to know specifically what you're doing around the mental health of the wider teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. It's great to see everyone on the call today. So I'm lucky enough to be the chair of what we call OMG Minds, which is the employee resource group for mental wellbeing that we have at OMG. We've been set up for probably about 5 or 6 years now. And we've been on quite a journey with it, to be brutally honest. We started off wanting to give everyone a bit more support around their mental well-being. And that really involved us training up about 80 mental health first aiders across the business. So there were people who were kind of knowledgeable and qualified to be able to talk to individuals when they were getting to that kind of point of crisis. But where we're trying to take things now is to start to get the conversation into more of the everyday, trying to look at it more proactively and talk about mental fitness and making sure that everyone is looking after their own mental well-being, whether they've got challenges or not, because it's something that should be worked on constantly, just like you might work on your physical fitness and go to the gym regularly or go out running or cycling or whatever you might do. So as part of that, we have set up in the last year a couple of recharge days throughout the year where people get the day off to kind of disconnect from work, and they get to focus on things that they're passionate about and spend time with their loved ones, and just be away from that kind of daily grind that we have in the industry. We've also partnered with a company called Selfspace. They do mental health coaching. They're a fantastic organisation, and we give all of our employees access to that, and they can have up to kind of 6 sessions with the Selfspace mental wellbeing coach, just to talk through any issues they might have, or even just if someone wants to work out how they can keep themselves more mentally fit. It's a great resource to have. We've also paid for a corporate subscription to Headspace as well. So everyone at OMG has access to that application, and there's loads of great content on there to help people manage their mental well-being. And we've recently rolled out a kind of mental health awareness training program as well that everyone has access to, because what we found is that the general kind of awareness of different mental health issues that people might have wasn't quite where we wanted it to be. So we're trying to kind of raise the floor of everyone's awareness and understanding of different mental health conditions, so that if those crop up in the workplace, people have got a little bit more knowledge to fall back on when they're talking to their colleagues or they're talking to their team about some of those things.
That's amazing. And have you seen a real shift internally in terms of people feeling like they've got those forums, and have you seen a shift in the culture around talking about mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot more people talk about it now. People are a lot more open at work. One of the interesting dynamics we're trying to wrestle with at the moment is that we see a lot more women putting their hand up for help, but men tend not to. Men tend not to talk about it as much. They only really start to ask for help when they've already fallen over, as opposed to when they feel like they're going to need more support. So we're trying to kind of dig into that at the moment, and it's quite good timing because it's kind of Men's Mental Health Month with Movember now. So we're trying to do a few things across the month to encourage men to kind of come together and talk about their mental well-being a lot more. So we'll see how that goes throughout the month, and hopefully we can start to get a lot more engagement from our male colleagues as well.
Yeah, Zay, please do jump in on the.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the comment on male mental health that Sean makes, which I think is very well documented and researched, and it's true at Channel 4 as well, that men are much worse at talking about these things than women are. Let's not go into all the many historic reasons why that may be the case, but it's certainly the practice now. We've done a couple of things here, and one of the interesting things was we talked to some of the men and did quite an unusual thing, which was a little criticised by some at the time, which was to set up a male employee resource group. You know, a lot of people thought, you know, you don't need an employee resource group because men aren't a vulnerable minority, and you know, how does that sit alongside having a women's group? And And actually, the reason we set up the men's group was very much for the insight that Sean gave. Men are really uncomfortable about it. They weren't finding an outlet. By the sheer nature that men are worse than women at talking about it, the For Mind group, the equivalent group that we have for mental health here, was incredibly female skewed, with very, very few men attending. And we thought a way in was to have a men's group. Now, of course, what happens over time is that men's group realizes the resources that are available in the For Mind mental health group, and they join together. And this month in November, they're putting things on together. You might as well say it's one employee group, but the sheer fact that you could enter it through thinking you were first going to go to a conversation amongst other men encouraged men to be a bit better at disclosing things. So, you know, you've got to kind of look for ways to bring people into the conversation, not just men, of course, but all people into the conversation.
Can I just add, Sharon, we've had a similar experience that, you know, NABS services are used more by women than men, and they are more likely, our data shows as well, to talk and share emotional support issues or mental wellness issues. And one of the responses, things we've done is set up a support bot and put more online resources for people to get to without having to, you know, call. And we do find that has a male skew now, and does take and help with the usage levels in terms of gender a little bit. So, and then that can encourage a call later. So I think I completely agree with Sean's age. You're just finding other ways for groups that maybe don't feel as comfortable making a call or talking and don't have the language or feel as confident to express it is a really good practice.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Opening up as ever to everybody on the call, are there any questions that you'd like to, or comments? While people are thinking about it, well, to everybody really, to Suzanne and Sean, what would you say to anyone that's struggling with that, going back to the data that Dan shared? I know you've all touched on it in different ways, but people that do have that, still that stigma around talking, talking out for fear of the impact on their career. Are there any kind of top tips on that in terms of?
I mean, it's my tip is to make that one first step, that one piece of contact to a sort of confidential or expert organisation. It could be internal, and clearly Channel 4 and Sean and OMG have got brilliant resources in their self-space offers, etc. But if you do feel for any reason you want that to be outside of your own organisation, then through the support bot or through one call to NABS, you get that one contact to just start that conversation. And everybody that we go back to and talk to about that, it is just making that very initial first step to say that you need some support and to start asking questions. That is the most important thing. I mean, I think all of us are saying that it's about creating resources and safe spaces for people to have those conversations and doing that in a number of ways. So my personal and professional tip is it's sometimes hard to go over the line on that very first step, but just make that first contact to one independent organizational person, and you know that it'll be incredible the amount of support you'll get.
Thanks, Sue. Great question from Sophie around any specific offering there is at NABS around climate and anxiety. That's something that comes up an awful lot in the work that we do around Ad Green and Ad Net Zero at the AA.
Yeah. I mean, not specifically, but it is. We're seeing a slight rise in terms of that topic on calls. I mean, it's a really good point. We don't have specialists around those particular topics, but the reality is that the conversation is really to think, about how you manage your anxiety and the steps you can take. So we don't have a specialist service around that. It's a good point, actually. I'll have a think about that, but it is beginning to rise is the reason why people are calling. But what NABS does is try and, like lots of counselling services do and lots of support services do, is try and get to the nub of what the issue is. And then we often direct people to other services, and that can be, our own therapeutic free services, and it can be other organisations. We do signpost to other people. But I'll get back and answer that question specifically, because I don't know whether we do signpost to anything around climate anxiety. It's a good question. Thank you.
You might have generated a role for yourself there, Sophie.
I might. Yes, you might.
Not that you're busy enough. That's a great one. Any other questions? I mean, we always like to end the call with what can everyone on this call do? What can they take back to either to the workplace or personally? I wonder if each of you have got, you know, just that one thing that you would say to people who might be just struggling and worrying about their own mental health and well-being, or worrying about a colleague as well. And I think that's often quite challenging. I've had that experience myself, where you're conscious that somebody else might be struggling, but you don't quite know how to broach that because maybe they're not even aware and able to find the way to express it. So
Sharon,
yeah.
hi. That's a really good point, actually. So if you are seeing a colleague of yours, like you say, struggling, you know, what is the advice that maybe Zaid or Sean would give about how to support them? You know, not being a mental health counsellor or all in champion personally. So how would you go about doing that?
Well, I know what I do personally, but this isn't a medical recommendation. Is assuming I know them well enough, I'll say something along the lines, you know, you seem to be struggling at the moment, or you seem to be a bit stressed at the moment. You know, it's okay to ask someone for help if you need it. If they've disclosed that that they are having some mental health problem, as opposed to you observing, I'll say, there are places you can go for help, and I'll list them. I won't try to play the role of a counsellor or a doctor. That's not appropriate. If it's someone around the office, around your business, and you don't know them well enough for that conversation, what I do is I work out who their buddy is at work, and go to the buddy and say, listen, I notice so-and-so struggling. Not going to be appropriate for me to say it, but I really think you should ask them if they're okay and direct them to get some help, which I've done a couple of times when I've seen it and thought, I mean, that person isn't someone I know well enough to say that to, but I know who their mate at work is, and that's a lot of easier way in, I think.
That's a really good point, because you don't want to seem like you're interfering, and I wouldn't want to come across as being a kind of a busybody, but you obviously have that person's best interests at heart and want to do the right things. That's a really good solution.
Thanks, both.
Just to add to that, I'll just say that it's really important, because we come across this in a work environment, but reasons for someone's struggles might not be work related, and so it's quite important just to kind of take someone out of a work context if you're going to have a conversation with them, or if you're recommending a kind of buddy has a conversation with them, kind of say to them, take them out for a coffee or something, get them out of the work environment to have that chat, just so they feel a little bit more comfortable and they might open up a little bit more as well.
That's great, thanks, Sean. Sue, do you want to have the NAB's word?
The NAB's word. I don't know if there's a NAB's word, but I mean, I think everyone's saying the same thing. I mean, we're all of our intentions are to create cultures in an industry where this is normalized. The data suggests it's very common. Lots of people on this call will know people or have had their own challenges, or know people who have. So it's all about a drive to normalize it and to create spaces for people to have that conversation. I mean, I totally agree with Zaid. I mean, lots of the conversations that we have, internally, I don't mean as professionals on NABs, is to just say, sometimes asking the question of, how are you? And, we're all so busy and there's so much pace and pressure going on that often just, taking 10 minutes to ask that question can unlock a conversation and the start of people getting the right support and help that they might need.
Thank you. And I think also trying to end on a positive as well. I mean, it's been a very positive conversation. Thank you all for your your openness and candor. I think, it's never waste a good crisis almost. And I think, there's an opportunity here as we look at hybrid working, that new model of working. It's not quite been cracked by anybody yet, I don't think, but there just does feel like there's a massive opportunity for us as we drive different working cultures to really embed this piece of work in that, so that everybody feels, it just adds to that sense of belonging, doesn't it? Ever grateful to everyone that's joined the session. Keep coming back. Thank you, Dan, as well, for all the stats and your hard work on that. Just a reminder that we are, as Dan said, we're doing the audience census again on March the 15th, 2023. Another stop the clock moment. So we will be coming to you with some more sort of copy and content for social, just to promote that within your organisations. But we're very keen to get even more than the 16,000 we achieved in 2021. And if you want to know more about becoming an all-in champion as an organisation, this is not for individuals, it's for your whole company, do get in touch with Bina. I know probably most of you already are, with submissions to do that. And we'll be announcing the next round of all-in champions in December. But thank you so much to the panel. I'm really grateful for you taking the time to share your own experiences and tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing. So see you all soon and enjoy a bit of sunshine today.